if you just don't really know too much about the history, the Voting Rights Act was one of the landmark legislations that Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement had fought for. So think about that for a minute. We hold Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement up as like, national heroes and everything. You'll have a lot of Republican people on the right will play lip service to supporting MLK and liking MLK. And then here they are kind of like spitting in the face of everything that he lived and died trying to do. And so the point of the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, there was the Civil Rights Act and there was the Voting Rights Act. The purpose of the Voting Rights Act was in the post-Confederate, in the fallout from the Confederacy and the Confederate States, which, if you're not aware, this is what the map of the U.S. looked like at the time of the Civil War. And the states in red are the states that had seceded from the country and joined the Confederacy. The states in the blue here were still part of the United States, part of the Union. The ones in light blue, I forget exactly. I think they were taking like a neutral stance or something along those lines. I don't remember exactly, but you get the idea. So after the Civil War, you had the era that we call the Jim Crow era. And during the Jim Crow era, you had people, all these, black Americans who were emancipated. They were freed from slavery. And here we go. That's what I was trying to look for. So they were freed from slavery. And you might be thinking like, okay, well, everything's said and done, right? Like we're all good now. Well, no, not really, because they then found themselves in a situation, a dynamic that we call in American history the Jim Crow era. And it's an era where, on paper, black Americans were emancipated, they were free, they weren't slaves anymore. But in reality, in the South, in the states that were Confederate states that had seceded, they maintained a system of basically apartheid. Basically, you have, your white citizens who have full rights and representation, even though that's not 100% true. Like women still didn't have the right to vote. There's other issues there, but the black citizens of those states, they were segregated against, which means they were kept out of economic opportunity. You have to imagine, right? These are people who were slaves for all of their life. Now they're free. How do you expect them to build up wealth, to have jobs? You're basically asking a group of people who have never been given a chance at education, who haven't been given any tools to, build their own businesses, have their own trades. They've been kept in, poverty and, ignorance because they don't get education and everything. And then you're expecting these people to what now? Like they're supposed to just magically out of nowhere all just become competent business leaders who have all the skills for all these different industries so that they can carve out an economic space for themselves in the post-Confederate United States. I mean, there's another aspect to that too, which is that if the white population in the South was already in control of all the industry and all the trades, not only are you as a slave or somebody who was a slave, not only are you now trying to build up some kind of economic opportunity and wealth for your community out of like literally nothing, you're given nothing. If you don't know this, you don't know this part of U.S. American history, the slaves, after they were emancipated, after they were freed, they were given nothing. The government didn't go, oh, hey, we kept you guys in slavery for generations. Like here, we're going to give you some sort of reparations. We're going to give you like a couple $1,000s or something, which at that time might have been a lot of money, right? But I'm just saying, like they weren't like, okay, well, it's really unfair what happened to you. we're setting you free now, but we're going to try to set you up for success. No, they basically took these people and like just put them ass out on the street. Good luck, right? You have no jobs, you have no skills, you have no education. All of the white citizens in the state own all the property, they own all the land, they own all the industry, they already have all the trades. How are you going to compete with them, right? You're trying to get into industries, you're trying to be like a worker with transferable skills and everything. You don't have them. But then on top of that, you're competing with people who already do, who already are controlling all those things, who, like, in any regular economic scenario, you are competing. Like if you're a plumber, you're competing with the other plumbers in the area. Now pretend that you're a plumber, or you want to be a plumber, but not only have you not been given any of the tools your entire life to learn how to be a plumber, there's no access to you. Like, think about it, like trade schools. I don't even know if they exist at the time, but probably apprenticeships. Well, all the apprenticeships went to the white citizens. All the people who already knew the trades and everything, they're not going to teach the black people, because the black people in those states are like, they scorn them. They view them as non-human. They view them as not real citizens. So they're not going to teach you. Okay, well, go to a trade school. What trade schools? There are no black trade schools at this time period. All the trade schools in that time would have been owned by the white population there, who were discriminatory of the black population. So there's no black trade schools to teach the freed black former slaves. But then you need to go out there into the job market and the economy, where the only people with money to actually spend to hire people are the white citizens who don't view you as a human, and who don't like you and want to discriminate against you. So good luck finding jobs. And then on top of that, again, you're competing with people who already have the skills and everything, who are keeping you from being able, from accessing that same opportunity. So, imagine you have all these people are now freed, but they don't really have economic opportunity. They don't really have like a true way to really kind of pick themselves up. And then in addition to this, the businesses at that time were segregated. So you're a black person, a freed black person now living in the South. Not only have you been kept in ignorance your entire life and kept from job opportunities your entire life, and none of the land is owned by you. It's all owned by people who used to be your slave owners. All the jobs, all the opportunities are owned by people who used to be your slave owners, or who have been treating you like less than human. But every time you go into a business, maybe you want to buy something, maybe you want to go get a service or buy some goods. Those businesses aren't going to serve you, because at that time period, it was legal for those businesses to literally discriminate. If you're, a former black slave in the South, businesses at that time did not have to do business with you. If you wanted to buy bread and fruit and groceries for your family, they're not going to sell to you. And there was no law against that. So they own everything. And not only do they own everything, but they're keeping you like out of any opportunity or access or economy during that time period. This is a part of the whole discrimination, racism aspect of American history that I feel like gets glossed over. There's a lot of people online today that want to pretend that systemic racism isn't an issue. But when you lay out the kind of scenario that I laid out for you, you can see how this is crazy and insane, and it's functionally hard, if like almost near impossible, for a group of people to reasonably be able to pick themselves up in that scenario. And keep in mind that the civil rights era comes about in the 1960s. And so between 1845, I think is the end of the Civil War. Maybe it's 65. At least, somewhere around 100 years, this group of people are segregated out of being able to have opportunity and economy and property in the South. They're ghettoized. I mean that like, I'm not trying to like use it, oh, you're ghetto. I'm not trying to use that in derogatory word. I'm saying like the term ghettoize it doesn't just apply to the black population in the United States during that time period. That term, to ghettoize a population, you find it in like Nazi Germany, for example. The Nazis ghettoized the Jewish population. It's when you take like an ethnic group or any other kind of little, subgroup of a population, and you basically cut them off from resources, and you put them in areas, Maybe you're not like physically, but like you make it so that the only place they really can go are the ghetto. And then they're now living in generations in the ghetto. And of course, this is going to have an effect on their outcomes and their opportunities. Yeah, of course. And so 100 years of that, then we get to the 1960s. Okay, keep in mind the 1960s. The 1960s in the United States, what is that? 60 years ago? 60 years ago. You have to understand, people who fought in the civil rights movement, people who were born and raised in segregation in this country, are still alive today. That was only 60 years ago. That means that if you look at boomers, all these people in charge of the United States government right now, on the Republican side, on the right, all these boomers, they were alive during this time period. They pretend like segregation and discrimination was thousands of years ago. They were alive for it, and they pretend like they don't know that. Black grandfathers and grandmothers alive today lived through segregation and had to fight for the right to have the vote, fight for the right to have jobs and opportunities and to not be segregated against in their lifetime. Now, when it actually ends, when we finally do pass the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, does that mean everything changes overnight? Of course not, right? It's going to be a process, not only because there's going to be a lot of local governments that aren't going to immediately comply, be in full compliance of the new rules. They're going to try to skirt the rules. The federal government had to go in certain situations to make sure that the states were actually following the law. They didn't want to. They tried to protest it. They tried to violate it. But to change from a society that is by definition institutionally segregated to society that is actually colorblind and free and fair, that doesn't happen overnight. People today want to pretend that that happens overnight and that it wasn't that long ago. It was not that long ago. Boomers alive today lived through it, which means that the generation of black people that are growing up today are only the grandchildren of people who were discriminated against for most of their life, or I'm sorry, maybe not for most of their life, but for a significant portion of their life and lived through it. Okay, how long do we expect it to take for a group that has been through that to suddenly reach parity with everybody else, to suddenly reach a level of economic self-sufficiency and, productivity and everything? We really expect it to happen overnight? We expect the population that was raised in segregation to just flip on a dime and all of a sudden everything's good. Now they're making as much as their white counterparts. Now they have as much opportunity. Now they have as much wealth. No, of course not. We think their children are going to do so. How are their children going to do so? They're raised by parents who themselves were raised in segregation, who didn't have the opportunity to build up the wealth or the skills or the networks. So their children probably aren't going to be able to either. Ideally, the children do a little bit better, but we can't reasonably expect them to change all of that overnight. And then we get to the grandkids, which is basically where we're at right now, and then their great grandkids. But like, I mean, I think that they're doing a lot better than they have been in the past, but to expect for it to be like 100% even and perfect, and to pretend like racism is not a factor anymore, and that these populations aren't dealing with the systemic effects that trickle through the generations, it's fantasy. It's dismissiveness. It's callousness. It's irresponsibility.